Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! The moss-green jacket dangled from the doorknob, a silent sentinel that had guarded the bedroom for days. Its owner, Jaden's sister, lay in the adjacent room, battling invisible demons that afflicted her mind. With each passing day, the garment's presence seemed to grow, taunting Jaden with its reminder. Jaden, lanky and bespectacled, fiddled with the frames of his glasses, his nervous habit betraying his inner turmoil. His twin, Lilia, normally a pillar of strength, had become a fragile shadow of herself, her once vibrant spirit dampened by anxiety's grip. A hoarse whisper drifted from the hallway, carrying a confession of defeat. He pivoted towards the sound, witnessing Lilia's broken form. Her golden hair, usually a radiant frame, drooped listlessly, contrasting sharply with the dark circles under her weary eyes.
"It's okay,"
he soothed, understanding in his voice.
"We'll make them understand."
5 interviews at 5 top universities in 3 days. Missed them, and I'm automatically rejected. Her voice cracked. Everything I've worked for, gone. Jaden crossed the room and guided his sister to sit on the edge of his bed. At 22, they were both taking a gap year after community college, preparing applications for universities that could propel them toward their dreams. For Lilia, that meant prestigious schools with competitive psychology programs. "The medication isn't working," she whispered, clutching her stomach. "Every time I think about sitting across from those admissions officers, I can't breathe. I can't eat. I can't—"
"I'll go for you,"
Jaden said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he'd fully processed the thought. Lilia looked up, confusion momentarily replacing panic. "What?" Jaden stood, running a hand through his own blonde hair, shorter than his sister's but the same shade. "We're twins. We have the same voice, almost. I know everything about you, your application, your essays. I could—" He gestured at the emerald blazer hanging on his door. "I could go as you." The absurdity of the suggestion hung in the air between them. Then Lilia gave a watery laugh. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Jaden walked to the blazer and took it off the hanger. "Remember when we were kids and we switched classes in 7th grade? Nobody noticed. We were 12, and you only lasted half a day before Mrs. Peterson caught you. Because I didn't prepare. This time we'd have weeks." He held the blazer against his chest. At 5'10", he was only an inch taller than his sister. They shared the same lean build, the same light complexion, the same slightly upturned nose and wide-set eyes, though hers were framed with makeup and his behind rectangular glasses. "You'd never pass," Lilia said, but Jaden noticed she didn't immediately dismiss the idea. "Wouldn't I?" He raised an eyebrow. "Let's find out." 3 weeks later, Jaden stood before the full-length mirror in Lilia's bedroom, barely recognizing himself. The transformation had consumed their days. Walking lessons, voice practice, makeup tutorials, watched and re-watched until his eyes burned. "Hold still," Lilia instructed, carefully applying mascara to his lashes. "You blink too much." "It feels weird having something that close to my eye," Jaden complained, but remained motionless. The emerald green blazer now fit him perfectly after Lilia's minor tailoring adjustments. The black cigarette pants hugged his hips in a way that had initially made him self-conscious, but the silicone hip pads Lilia had ordered online gave him a more feminine silhouette. Pearl earrings adorned his newly pierced ears. For authenticity. Lilia had insisted, though the pain had made him question the entire plan. Most startling was his hair. A high-quality blonde wig matched Lilia's shoulder-length cut exactly, styled with the slight wave she preferred. The foundation and contouring had narrowed his jaw, highlighted his cheekbones, and softened the angles of his face. "You know," Lilia said, stepping back to assess her work, "you make a pretty convincing me." Her smile held a mixture of pride and something else. Wonder, perhaps. Jaden turned left, then right, studying his reflection. He'd expected to feel ridiculous, or at the very least, uncomfortable. Instead, a strange calm had settled over him, as if he'd stepped into a role he somehow already knew how to play. "The voice is still the issue," he reminded her, speaking in the higher register they'd been practicing. "I can't maintain it when I get nervous." "Then don't get nervous," Lilia replied simply, adjusting the collar of his blazer. "Remember, you're not Jaden pretending to be Lilia. You are Lilia." That evening, they rehearsed every possible interview question, with Lilia coaching him on her mannerisms, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when thinking, how she gestured with open palms when making important points, her habit of crossing her ankles rather than her knees when seated. "What's my favorite book?" she quizzed as they sat across from each other, pretending they were in an interview. "The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath," Jaden answered, his voice carefully modulated. "But in an interview setting, I'd probably mention Mindset by Carol Dweck, since it relates more to my field of interest." Lilia nodded approvingly. "Good. What extracurricular activities am I most proud of?" "My volunteer work at the Crisis Text Line, which sparked my interest in clinical psychology, particularly in anxiety disorders." He tucked a strand of wig hair behind his ear, mimicking her unconscious habit. They continued late into the night, covering childhood stories, academic achievements, personal philosophies, anything an admissions officer might ask to get to know the real Lilia better. As Jaden finally returned to his room, carefully removing the wig and wiping away the makeup, he caught himself studying his bare face in the mirror with an unexpected feeling of loss. Without the cosmetic enhancements, his features seemed too sharp, too angular, somehow less authentic than the face he'd worn all day. He dismissed the thought quickly. This was a temporary solution to help his sister through a crisis. Nothing more. The morning of the first interview arrived with a flurry of last-minute preparations. Lilia, looking better than she had in weeks now that the immediate pressure was off her, fussed over every detail of Jaden's appearance. "Remember, Dean Richards always asks about ethical dilemmas in psychological research," she reminded him for the third time as she adjusted his pearl earrings. "And don't forget to mention my interest in their trauma-informed therapy program."
"Lilia."
Jaden caught her hands, stilling their nervous movement. "I've got this. You need to stay calm, or you'll make me nervous." She exhaled slowly, nodding. "You're right. I'm sorry." Her eyes suddenly filled with tears. "Thank you for doing this. I don't know many brothers who would—" "Hey, what are twins for, if not identity theft?" he joked, earning a watery laugh. He squeezed her hands reassuringly. "This is going to work." An hour later, Jaden sat in the reception area of Westmore University's admissions building, ankles crossed, hands folded neatly in his lap. The emerald blazer felt like armor, the pearl earrings like talismans. His heart pounded, but outwardly, he maintained the poised confidence that was Lilia's trademark. "Ms. Reynolds?" A middle-aged woman with a clipboard appeared in the doorway. "Dean Richards will see you now." Standing smoothly, Jaden adjusted the blazer and smiled.
Thank you,
he replied in Lilia's voice, perfectly pitched and modulated after weeks of practice. The interview room was bright and airy, with large windows overlooking the campus quad. Dean Richards, a distinguished man with salt and pepper hair, rose to greet him with an extended hand. "Ms. Reynolds, a pleasure to meet you. Your application was quite impressive." Jaden shook his hand firmly. Not too strong, Lilia had coached, and took the offered seat. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with me, Dean Richards. I've been looking forward to learning more about Westmore's approach to psychological research." The conversation flowed more naturally than Jaden had dared hope. He discussed Lilia's research interests, her volunteer work, her academic achievements, all with the passionate conviction that was genuinely hers, if channeled through him. When the ethical dilemma question came, as predicted, he was ready with a thoughtful response about balancing scientific advancement with participant well-being. 50 minutes later, Dean Richards was walking him to the door, clearly impressed. "I have to say, Ms. Reynolds, your passion for the field is evident. I think you would be an excellent fit for our program." "Thank you, sir. That means a great deal coming from you," Jaden replied, feeling a surge of genuine pride, both in his performance and in his sister's accomplishments that had made such a performance possible. Outside the building, he allowed himself a moment of giddy relief before composing himself for the taxi ride to the next university. 1 down, 4 to go. By the end of the 3rd day, Jaden had completed all 5 interviews. Each had gone remarkably well, with admissions officers responding positively to Lilia's articulate responses and evident enthusiasm. He returned to their apartment exhausted but triumphant. Lilia was waiting anxiously, pouncing the moment he walked through the door. "How did Northwestern go? Was Professor Collins there? Did they ask about the research proposal?" Jaden kicked off the uncomfortable heels, the one part of the disguise he couldn't wait to abandon, and collapsed onto the couch.
"It was perfect. They loved you."
He grinned.
"All of them did."
Sitting beside him, Lilia listened intently as he recounted each interview in detail. As the stories unfolded, her anxiety visibly dissolved, replaced by growing excitement. "I can't believe we pulled this off," she marveled when he'd finished.
"You're my hero, Jaden. Seriously."
He shrugged, suddenly feeling strange about accepting gratitude for essentially being someone else.
"It was actually kind of interesting."
He struggled to find the right words.
"Being you, I mean."
Lilia tilted her head, studying him. "Interesting how?"
"I don't know.
Easy, I guess? Like slipping into a different version of myself." He laughed self-consciously.
"That sounds weird."
"No, it doesn't," she said softly. "Some people feel more comfortable in certain roles or presentations. There's nothing weird about that." Jaden nodded, though her words stirred something uncomfortable in his chest. He stood abruptly.
"I should get changed. These clothes aren't exactly loungewear."
Later that night, after removing the makeup and wig, Jaden found himself staring again at his reflection. The face looking back at him felt like a stranger's, or perhaps more accurately, like a mask he was wearing that didn't quite fit anymore. He ran his fingers over his jawline, wondering how it would feel to have the softer contours the makeup had created. "Just tired," he told himself firmly, just coming down from 3 days of intense performance. But as he drifted off to sleep, his dreams were filled with interviews where he wasn't pretending at all. The acceptance letters began arriving 2 weeks later. Westmore first, then Cambridge University, Northwestern, Berkeley, and finally Stanford, all offering Lilia places in their psychology programs, several with scholarship offers. Their apartment erupted in celebration, with Lilia screaming in delight and throwing her arms around Jaden. "You did it!" she exclaimed, bouncing on her toes. "All 5! I never could have done this without you!" "They accepted you, not me," Jaden corrected gently. "Your grades, your essays, your accomplishments. I just delivered the package." "And delivered it perfectly," she insisted, beaming. Life should have returned to normal after that. The emergency was over. Jaden's unusual assistance no longer needed. He should have settled back into his own identity, his own plans, his own life. But something had shifted. It started with small things. He found himself automatically sitting with his ankles crossed rather than spread comfortably apart. His speaking voice occasionally lilted upward at the ends of sentences. He spent extra time in the shower, studying the contours of his body with a critical eye that had never been there before. Then came the night he couldn't sleep, thoughts churning restlessly. At 3 a.m., he crept into Lilia's room and borrowed her mascara and lipstick, applying them inexpertly in the bathroom mirror. The face that looked back at him was neither fully his nor fully Lilia's, but something in between, something that made his heart race with a mixture of fear and recognition. A week later, Lilia found a package delivered to their apartment addressed to him. "What's this?" she asked, handing him the small box. Jaden felt his face flush. "Just something I ordered online." In his bedroom, he opened it with trembling hands. A set of clip-on earrings, similar to the pearls he'd worn for the interviews, but less formal. He'd seen them while helping Lilia shop online and had been unable to stop thinking about them. That weekend, while Lilia was out with friends, he found himself standing in front of her closet. The emerald blazer hung there, now a symbol of something far more significant than a successful deception. Beside it were dresses, blouses, skirts, all in sizes not far from what might fit him. "Just curious," he whispered to himself, reaching for a simple blue dress. "Just seeing." When he looked in the mirror 20 minutes later, fully dressed in Lilia's clothes with the clip-on earrings in place, the rush of emotion was overwhelming. Not embarrassment or shame, as he might have expected, but relief, as if he'd been holding his breath for years without realizing it. He didn't hear Lilia return until she was standing in the doorway behind him. "Jaden?" He froze, caught in an act he couldn't begin to explain. When he turned, expecting shock or confusion, he found only gentle curiosity in his sister's eyes. He began, then stopped, words failing him. Lilia stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. "The blue brings out your eyes," she said simply, as if commenting on the weather. "But you need a different necklace with that neckline." The careful normality of her response broke something open inside him. Before he knew it, he was crying, years of unnamed feelings suddenly demanding acknowledgement. Lilia held him while he tried to explain something he was only beginning to understand himself. How being her for those 3 days had awakened questions that had always been there, dormant beneath the surface of his consciousness. How the clothes and makeup weren't about pretending, but about recognition. How terrifying it was to acknowledge a truth he'd never allowed himself to see. "I don't know what this means," he finished, wiping at his eyes, smearing the mascara he'd applied. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now." "There's no supposed to," Lilia said firmly. "There's only what feels right to you." She squeezed his hand. "And whatever that is, I'm here. We'll figure it out together. The following months brought gradual exploration. Jaden researched gender identity, read memoirs, joined online forums where others shared similar journeys. Lilia became his confidant and guide, offering makeup tips, clothing advice, and unwavering support as he ventured slowly into public presenting as female, first just on walks around the neighborhood, then to a movie, eventually to a dinner with supportive friends. At home, he began to experiment with different names, trying them on like the clothes he and Lilia now shared freely. "Jessica?" Lilia suggested one evening as they sat sorting through nail polish colors. He wrinkled his nose. "Too different. I want something that feels connected to who I've been." "Jamie?" "Maybe." He examined a bottle of pale pink polish against his skin tone. "What about Lilia?" His sister looked up, surprised. "My name? It always felt like it could be mine too, somehow. Even before." He gestured vaguely at himself, at the transition taking place both externally and internally. "Would that be weird for you?" Lilia considered this, head tilted thoughtfully. "Actually, I think I'd be honored." A slow smile spread across her face. "Besides, it would make your performance as me retroactively authentic." They laughed together, the sound reinforcing the bond that had only strengthened through this journey. Later that night, alone in his room, he whispered the name to himself. Lilia. The syllables felt right on his tongue, like coming home to a place he'd always been meant to find. The decision to begin hormone therapy came 4 months after the interviews. The changes would be gradual, softening skin, redistributing fat, eventually altering emotional responses. But the commitment itself was momentous. Sitting in the endocrinologist's office, prescription in hand, he felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration. "Are you sure about this?" his sister asked as they left the appointment. "It's a big step." "I'm sure about trying," he replied carefully. "I can't promise I won't be scared sometimes, or uncertain, or that everything will be perfect. But I'm sure I need to follow this path and see where it leads." That night, he wrote a letter to his parents, who lived across the country. They'd been distant figures in the twins' lives even before they'd moved away for college, and contact now was limited to occasional phone calls and holiday visits. The thought of their reaction brought knots to his stomach, but he knew this wasn't something he could, or wanted to, hide. The reply came a week later, terse, confused, requesting time to process. Not the outright rejection he'd feared, but not the embrace he'd secretly hoped for either. It was his sister who reminded him that his timeline wasn't everyone else's. "They'll catch up," she assured him. "And if they don't right away, that's their journey. It doesn't invalidate yours." 2 months into hormone therapy, looking at his slightly softer features in the mirror, he made another decision. Legal name change paperwork spread across the kitchen table as he methodically filled out form after form. "Lilia Reynolds," he wrote, the name flowing naturally from his pen. Then, looking up at his sister who was fixing coffee nearby. "Are you really sure you're okay with this? Sharing your name?" She brought 2 mugs to the table and sat beside him. "I've been thinking about it, actually. What if I went by my middle name? I've always liked Claire." He blinked in surprise. "You'd do that? Change what everyone calls you?" "Why not? People reinvent themselves all the time." She shrugged, then grew more serious. "Besides, watching you these past months, the courage it's taken to become who you truly are, It's inspired me. Made me realize we all have choices about how we present ourselves to the world. Tears welled unexpectedly. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Yes, you could have, she corrected gently. It might have taken longer, been harder, but this was always inside you, waiting to emerge. I just had the privilege of helping with the butterfly's cocoon. 6 months after the interviews that had changed everything, Lilia, formerly Jaden, stood before the mirror in what was now unmistakably her bedroom. The evidence of transition surrounded her, hormone prescriptions on the nightstand, a collection of colorful scarves hanging from a wall hook, makeup organized neatly on the dresser. The emerald green blazer hung on the closet door, a talisman now, rather than a disguise. She slipped it on over a cream-colored blouse, appreciating how differently it fit her changing body. The black cigarette pants followed, then low heels, and finally the pearl earrings, no longer clips, but fitting perfectly through the long-heeled piercings in her ears. Her blonde hair had grown out several inches. No wig needed anymore, though extensions helped achieve the length she wanted. The face looking back at her from the mirror was softer now, both from hormones and from the skilled makeup application she'd mastered under her sister's tutelage. Ready for dinner? Claire, formerly Lilia, appeared in the doorway, dressed in a simple black dress and heels. Almost. Lilia applied a final touch of lipstick, a shade that complemented, rather than matched her sister's. Nervous about seeing Mom and Dad? It would be their first visit since Lilia's transition began. They'd progressed from terse emails to cautiously supportive phone calls, but face-to-face would be different. A little, Claire admitted. But I'm more excited than nervous. I want them to see how happy you are. How happy we both are. Lilia nodded, taking a deep breath. I still can't believe sometimes that this all started with a panic attack and 5 college interviews. Maybe it started long before that, Claire suggested. Maybe those interviews were just the door that finally opened. Taking one last look in the mirror, Lilia saw not a disguise or a performance, but her authentic self, a self that had always been there, waiting patiently to be recognized and embraced. The journey hadn't been easy and was far from over, but standing here now, she felt a peace she'd never known before. Well, she said, turning away from the mirror to face her sister. Ready to walk through the next door together? Claire smiled, offering her arm. Always. As they left the apartment, Lilia felt the weight of the pearl earrings against her neck. No longer a costume piece, but a part of who she'd become. The emerald green blazer, once borrowed, now belonged to her in every sense. Just as this life, this identity, this truth had always been hers, waiting to be claimed. The future held uncertainties, relationships to navigate, challenges to face, growth still to come. But for now, walking arm in arm with the person who had supported her most crucial transformation, Lilia felt nothing but gratitude for the panic that had led to opportunity, for the performance that had revealed truth, for the courage to become, finally and fully, herself.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!